Captain Daniel Carter had worn the uniform for nearly 2 decades. To the people of his hometown of Rosewood, he was the definition of courage, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, the kind of man who carried the weight of battles on his back without ever letting it show. But behind the medals and salutes, Daniel's heart belonged to one soul more than anyone else, his dog, Shadow. Shadow was a large black Labrador with silver fur dusting his muzzle. Loyal, fearless, and endlessly affectionate, Shadow had been Daniel's companion since before his last deployment. The bond between them was unshakable, built on years of midnight walks, quiet moments, and the countless times Shadow had waited by the door for his master to come home. When Daniel was deployed overseas for what would be his final mission, Shadow refused to sleep in his bed. Instead, he lay by the front door, waiting for footsteps that never came. The news broke on a chilly November morning. Emily Carter, Daniel's wife, answered the knock on the door. 2 soldiers stood there, solemn, hats in hand. Her breath caught. She didn't need words to know what they carried. Daniel had been critically injured in an ambush. He was alive, but barely. Flown to a military hospital thousands of miles away, doctors said his time was short. Emily's knees buckled. Tears spilled before the officers even spoke. But Shadow reacted differently. He stood, ears pricked, tail wagging hopefully. To him, the scent of soldiers meant Daniel was near. He didn't understand the silence, the grief, the heaviness pressing on the room. He only knew his master wasn't home. Days later, Emily received a call from Daniel's commander. "Mrs. Carter. I know this is difficult. The captain is stable enough to speak, but his condition is deteriorating quickly. He has a request." Emily clutched the phone. "Anything. Tell me." The officer's voice wavered. "He wants to see Shadow. Just one last time." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. The military hospital was overseas, strict, guarded, not a place where animals were permitted. But it was Daniel's final wish. Shadow, lying at Emily's feet, lifted his head as if he sensed the weight of her tears. His amber eyes met hers, steady and pleading, as though he already knew arrangements were impossible on paper. No rules allowed dogs in secure medical wards. But word spread among Daniel's unit. Soldiers who had fought beside him, who had seen him save lives without hesitation, rallied. "If his last wish is to see his dog," one said, "then we'll make it happen." It became a mission, not sanctioned by the military, but fueled by love and loyalty. Soldiers pulled strings, nurses looked the other way, and Emily packed Shadow into a carrier for the longest journey of his life. The flight was tense. Shadow whined softly, pressing his nose to Emily's hand as the hours passed. She whispered, "Hang on, boy. He needs you." When they finally landed, a young lieutenant escorted them through back doors and quiet corridors, dodging protocols at every turn. At the end of a long hallway, Emily saw him. Daniel. Pale, frail, tubes running across his body. But his eyes, those same steady eyes, lit up the moment they saw Shadow. "Shadow." Daniel's voice was weak, barely a whisper, but Shadow recognized it instantly. The dog let out a cry, a sound no one had ever heard from him before, half whimper, half yelp of joy. He lunged forward, tail thumping, as nurses helped lift him gently onto the bed. The moment Shadow's weight pressed against Daniel's chest, the room shifted. Daniel's trembling hands sank into the dog's fur. Tears streamed down his face as Shadow licked him frantically, whining and pawing as if trying to hold him there, to keep him from slipping away. "You waited for me," Daniel whispered, his forehead resting against Shadow's. "Good boy, you never gave up, did you?" Emily, standing by, covered her face. Soldiers in the room turned away, blinking back tears. The monitor beeped steadily, but softer now, as though even machines recognized the sacredness of this reunion. For hours, Shadow refused to move. He lay pressed against Daniel, breathing with him, heart beating with his. Nurses tried to adjust tubes, but Shadow growled softly until they backed away. Then, something remarkable happened. Daniel, who had been fading rapidly for days, grew stronger with every passing minute of Shadow's presence. His pulse steadied. His breathing eased. Doctors exchanged baffled looks. "It's impossible," one murmured. "But his stabilizing." Emily stroked her husband's hand, whispering, "He just needed Shadow." For 3 more days, Daniel held on. Long enough to tell his children he loved them over video call. Long enough to whisper private words to Emily. Long enough to give Shadow one last belly rub, his hand trembling but sure. On the 4th day, as dawn broke, Daniel took his final breath, his hand still tangled in Shadow's fur. Shadow didn't move. He pressed his head against Daniel's chest, listening to the silence, then let out a long, mournful howl that carried through the corridors. Every soldier who heard it swore they would never forget that sound. When Daniel's body was flown home, Shadow walked beside the casket, wearing a black ribbon tied to his collar. Thousands lined the streets of Rosewood. Soldiers saluted. Children cried. Strangers pressed hands to their hearts. But all eyes were on Shadow. At the funeral, he sat by the coffin, refusing to move. When the flag was folded and given to Emily, Shadow nudged it with his nose, then curled at her feet, guarding her as fiercely as he had guarded Daniel. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Shadow never left Emily's side. Every evening, he would lie by the door again, ears pricked, waiting. Some said he was waiting for Daniel to come home. Others believed he was keeping his promise, to protect the family in Daniel's place. But one thing was certain, Shadow carried Daniel's spirit in every step, every bark, every watchful glance. Years later, Shadow grew old. His muzzle turned white, his legs stiff. Yet he never stopped waiting by the door at night. One autumn evening, Emily found him lying there, head resting on Daniel's old boots. His breathing was shallow, his eyes dim but peaceful. She knelt, stroking his fur. "You miss him, don't you, boy?" Shadow gave one final sigh, as if answering. Then, quietly, he slipped away. Emily wept, clutching him, but in her heart, she knew the truth, Shadow wasn't gone. He had simply gone to find his master. And somewhere beyond this world, in fields no war could touch, Captain Daniel Carter knelt once more, strong, whole, smiling. "Shadow," he called. And the black Labrador came running, tail wagging, leaping into his arms. Forever. The tale of Captain Daniel and Shadow spread far beyond Rosewood. Newspapers called it The Soldier and His Dog. Veterans spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones. Families shared it at dinner tables, wiping their eyes. Because in the end, it wasn't about battles won or lost. It wasn't about medals or ranks. It was about love. About loyalty. About a soldier whose last wish wasn't glory or riches, but the simple embrace of the one creature who had always been there. And what happened next, the bond that carried beyond death, broke everyone who heard it. But it also healed them. Reminding the world that sometimes, the greatest heroes walk on four legs.